Welcome to another episode of Mad in Love, where we dive deep into all things pertaining to relationships, healing, and personal growth. I'm your host, Dr. David Hawkins, and today we're bringing you a special edition of our beloved Dr. Hawkins Reacts segment. Joining me, as always, is my esteemed colleague. Hello, Jonathan Glover. Katie, what are we doing today?
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. So, hello, everyone. I'm Katie, and I'm thrilled to share that we're opening up a new way for you to be a part of the Dr. Hawkins React series. We're inviting you, our listeners, to email us at madinlove@marriagerecoverycenter.com with your questions, stories, and any relationship challenges you may be facing. This is a unique opportunity for you to get insights directly from Dr. Hawkins and Jonathan Glover. So, to kick things off, we received an email that we think may resonate with many of you. It's a good insight into what we see here, the client care team, what kind of phone calls we get, the kind of stories that are shared to us.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit of a pin drop compared to what you see in sessions as clinicians. So I'm really excited about this new segment for our listeners to understand the dynamics that we see here at the Marriage Recovery Center. Well, anyway, this starts off with, hello. I have binge watched nearly all of your Mad in Love podcasts, and finally, someone understood what has been happening in my life, as well as me, myself, finally understanding what has happened to me the past 13 years. When I watch the podcast with Dr. Hunt and Dr. Hawkins about reactive abuse, that one really hits home. I felt like I had become a kind of abuser my partner had been to me after all these years. Initially in our relationship, he would do what I call lectures, where I would sit on the couch for hours and hours, sometimes until 3 or 4 in the morning, while he ranted and raved at all the things I was doing to him and why he was feeling the way he was because of what I have done to him. I've thanked him for every chore he does around the house because he's done it for me. He believes relationships means that you should be there for each other, but what he means is I'm there for him. He is not there when I need him. He believes that if you don't agree with him, then you're against him. It's black and white. You have to agree with his feelings. You have to agree his feelings are more valid, more hurt, more sad than your own because he had an abusive upbringing and I couldn't possibly understand what he's going through. And he is physically impaired. So no one understands what he deals with every day. If I have a cough, it isn't important because he says, I deal with that every day. So therefore, his life is worse than how I'm feeling at that moment. I have a saying that it's all about him in our relationship. Then I learned to argue back. Frustrated at the gaslighting, his screaming fits of rage if I brought things to his attention, and the low blows at each other. I became just as volatile as him behind closed doors. I'd never been this kind of person in my life, and I am shamed. Anyway, jump to 10 years later, I ended up having an affair for 4 months with a kind, wonderful person who treated me like a princess. I know an affair for what it is, and they never last, nor do they rarely succeed. I confessed to my partner, and it took 2 months from him calling me names to professing his love, to back to threatening to ruin my life, to turning up in the night crying and begging me to come back and how much he would change. So, of course, I ended the affair and took him back. We went to counseling for a year, a complete waste of time. He would scream and yell and even start to tell the therapist it was a waste of time and that because I was the one who had the affair, he couldn't understand why he had to do any of the work to change. I'm sure you have seen the rages of F this, it's a waste of time, this is over tantrums in the therapist room, talking over me and not listening to anything I had to say. She didn't pick up on anything, but played into this, tell me what you're feeling tantrums, and the sessions became all about him. I learned to just shut up and to not rock the boat to get through the session. When we argue or have a disagreement, an issue in our relationship, he brings up the affair. If the argument is not going his way, he could say the words, it triggers me because of the time you were sleeping with him. Or, well, you were the one who had the affair, so not sure why I have to give more into this relationship. It's his trump card to shut me up because I cannot argue with the hurt I have caused him with one action over the years of hurt I have received. I would love a podcast, speaking to us now, a discussion, and more information on how we as victims could overcome this type of dynamic. Maybe other listeners have done something damaging to a relationship, and now the abuser has his trump card that he plays when things are not going his way. How do we combat this? Is it even possible to combat this if we have caused the abuser to have his own righteous moment where we, the victims, have done some damage? He brings up how embarrassed he is because he begged for me to come back and took me back, and how that looks to others. He also thinks I should be grateful he took me back at all. I understand I have made my own mistake in the relationship. I have to build trust back and responsibilities that I have to admit to. But it seems he doesn't really want to work on those other issues or understand why or how the affair came to be in the first place. It's just something he could use now against me. I don't know if this relationship will last. Every time I think of leaving, he love bombs me. Yes, I see it for what it is. And I stay until the cycle starts again. I cannot leave. I lost my house, my business. He threatened to ruin me and the guy I had an affair with. I have to stay until the things change. He's doing counseling on his own with a different man, but I'm sure he's not telling the full story of his abuse to his therapist, and I can't take it anymore. Could you please do a podcast on when the abuser damages a relationship, however that may look, and the abuser now can turn things on the victim? It would be something I'm sure a lot of listeners would benefit from.
Oh my. Layers and layers and layers of issues, just like you said, Katie. I'll tackle a couple of there's so much to talk about, like you've said, and Jonathan, I'll hit a couple of things, and then we'll just unpack this woman's story. I really appreciate her writing, and I really appreciate that she seems very self-aware. She's reflecting on all of these different pieces of what's happening in her relationship. I'll jump to the end, though. In the end, she said, I have to stay because he will do this and he will do that and he will do this and he will do that. And he very well may do all of those things. He sounds profoundly emotionally immature. I'm sure Jonathan and I will end up talking about, is he really open for change at all? But anyway, her staying out of fear, that's just not going to work. And she, and I want to say this very carefully, she will, by staying and by anything we tolerate, we reinforce. It's a very important concept. Whatever we tolerate, whatever we put up with, then we are enabling it. That's a better way to say it. So she is enabling. She doesn't cause it. This man is responsible for his many, many, many bad behaviors. But I would be saying to her and want to say to her and anyone who's in an abusive relationship, as she is, boy, let's be really clear about what you are tolerating and what it's time not to tolerate. Why don't I pause there? There's a lot more to say. Jonathan, you have any? What's your high level reaction to this woman's story?
Yeah, I don't quite know where to start. There's a lot of factors present, and there's I think I want a question or something to respond to, so I know which direction to go. I liked the way that she worded things in this email or this submission. It did not sound like she was excusing her own behavior. and I don't think she used the term reactive abuse when she was describing the affair, but I just want to clarify for anybody listening, I do not put an affair into a category of reactive abuse.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think that she was saying that, but I do want to
Right.
bring this up because it is something that I see at times. Reactive abuse is lashing out defensively against the abuser, and it happens when the victim is in a position where they need to defend themselves, or when the emotions are so high that they're thrown into that survival state and they are reacting to what is right in front of them. An affair is not reactive. It's something that you are engaging in. It's not a reaction to something. So for another reason why I'm saying this is that I actually think that it's important to identify with the affair that it sounds like, was very aware that she has needs in a relationship, and she has needs as a human being. And I think that she was however she got into this relationship with this other person, I think that she became very acutely aware that of the fact that she has these needs, but also that she is not and was not getting these needs met from her husband. And I think that is a really important distinction to make, but also
Totally.
that would be an important conversation to be having.
I want to toggle off of that, Jonathan. I did some years back. I did some research into why people have affairs, and there's a lot of material out there on that topic. And you're absolutely right. This is, while he, according to her, says to her, "You're the one who had the affair. Bad you, bad you, bad you." That's actually not what needs to happen. I agree with you. They need to have a robust conversation. Robust meaning painful, difficult, very important, probably with a therapist of some kind who sits with them and says, let's talk about why it happened. Let's talk about how do these things occur, and it will help you so it doesn't occur in the future. But there's some things happening in this relationship that set the stage for her to have the affair. Is she responsible for her choices? For sure, but there's problems in this relationship that need to be talked about. So when presumably when he says something like, "You're the one who had the affair," and well, yes, yes, and now we need to talk about why it happened and what parts in the relationship set the stage for it to happen and what we can do now going forward. Is that all land okay with you, Jonathan? Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think it's a difficult conversation to have because you don't want to sound like you are explaining or excusing the affair, and the behaviors that might be involved with that. I think if this couple, if these two individuals want to work on addressing the problems in their marriage, there also needs to be a commitment to fidelity. I mean, continued infidelity is just going to cause more rupture in the trust and the ability to move forward. So that also has to happen. But I agree with you.
Yeah.
The conversation then needs to focus on what are the needs in the relationship, and what are the patterns, what has existed, what currently exists, what are those behaviors called, what are those patterns of communication and interaction.
I heard a cliche that I think is just really, really, it's apropos to what we're talking about right now. And the cliche is this: what we don't work out, we act out. All right, what does that mean? That means if we don't have issues settled between us, we're going to do some bad stuff. We're going to take some drugs, or we're going to shoplift, or we're going to spend money too much, or we're going to gain weight, or we're going to have an affair, or something bad is going to happen. So listeners, my goodness, if you've got issues that are not worked out between you and within you, this couple can look at each other and say, well, that'll never happen. We'll never have an affair again. And if I was going to look at them, I'd say, I'm not sure about that. I don't know, because you're miserable. You're absolutely miserable in this relationship. Might you not have an affair again? You might not, but you might abuse food or drugs or alcohol or any number of other things, but you're miserable. So I would just say that that doesn't give any of us license to act badly. But if we don't have issues worked out, we're going to act them out. Going back to the start with this woman, my goodness, let's see some of the other pieces involved. She says she sits for hours and hours and hours and hours while he rants and demands that she agree with him. That's troubled. It's all troubled, because healthy relationships are two people who come together and they agree to come together. They sit and they talk about things, and they stop talking about them when either one of them says, I want to stop talking about this. Nobody is held captive. We don't just sit and go, okay, I've got to listen to him or her yell at me, rant, demand that I agree. All of that is troubled. And yet, this woman implies, and I think she's correct, this is woven into a lot of relationships. You and I, Jonathan, hear this story way too often, far more often than I care to hear it, that someone has been held captive and their mate has ranted and raved and riddled and challenged if anybody disagrees. That demanding agreement, that is really, really troubled and really, really wrong. And if that is in your relationship, anybody who's watching this podcast, that must change. A relationship needs to be an equal coming together where any point of view has validity. Now, don't take me at an extreme there. I mean, if you think there's little green monsters sitting on clouds outside your window, I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about, look, if I'm a Republican or a Democrat or a Protestant or a Catholic or a this or a that or whatever it is I believe in, I get to have that belief. And I want to be with someone who sits and we share ideas together. I'm never held captive. I'm never dominated, and I'm never dismissed. One quick tangent here. I did a video series or video some time back, and I said there's the 3D of narcissism: someone who's dominant, someone who's dismissive, and someone who's defensive. Any of those three qualities in a relationship will lead to real trouble. What are your thoughts about when this woman says, I have to sit for hours and while he rants and raves, and if I disagree with him, it's gonna bode very badly for me, she says. And
Yeah.
she's learned that it's all about him, and she's got to live with that.
Well, I agree with what you said, and I also just want to mention that the terms that you use, the defensiveness, the needing to be right, the blame shifting, the sort of the emotional manipulation, and the power dynamics that are there.
Good word.
All of those terms are used to describe accurately her experience. And the reason why there's a disconnect is that that's not the narrative that he is telling himself that he's engaged in, and that's not the narrative that he would describe that situation to us. And so for anybody out there who hears their wife or their partner, whoever, saying these words, saying this is what's going on, they're talking about their experience. This is what's going on. And the narrative that he would likely, I don't know, I'm going to mind read him for a minute here, but I think that the narrative that he would likely be describing is that he wants to be heard, he wants to share, he wants to be validated, and so he's just trying to express himself, and it's that wording that is very disjointed. It does not line up with her experience and what she's describing. And I think that that's one of the big reasons why a lot of the guys that I work with, a lot of the guys that we work with, don't resonate initially with some of these words until they really hear that part. Is that it's not condemning him, it's not shaming him, it's not disrespecting him. It's actually talking about her experience. This is what's going on for her. And if he can get on board with that and start to understand, oh, when I do these things, this is the impact that it has on her and on the relationship, that's kind of the initial next step that needs to happen.
I'd love to hear you respond to this, Jonathan. I've done a lot of thinking about why does he do that? You know, that question we get asked all the time. How can he love me and do that? And one of the reasons he can do that, I'd love to hear you respond to this, is that many of these men, like her husband, have an underlying attitude of arrogance and superiority. So what I find again and again and again is that underneath all of it, when I talk to him and I really listen closely, he really does think he's right. He really does think that there's a way to do things. He really does have an attitude of superiority. They don't admit that right out of the gate, but after I work with them for a period of time, they're able to kind of say, I think I have been arrogant and have had an attitude of superiority. What do you think about that? Do you find that or not?
I think in a lot of cases, yes. And then there are also times where that person who is just the narcissist, who is just driving at you have to agree with me, you have to recognize that what I'm saying is true, actually comes a lot more from that toxic shame space where they do not feel confident, they don't feel like they're very sure of themselves, and they have this codependent need to be worshipped, valued, told that they are right, that they're okay, that they need somebody else to actually regulate them because they're unable to do it themselves.
That's interesting.
As a non-clinician, to me it does sound like low self-esteem. Strong, health, maybe not healthy, but just strong people don't need validation. They already have their inner core figured out. They don't need validation from others around them. They're okay with other people disagreeing with them because they already know that they are okay. People who seek validation oftentimes seem to me like they need that validation. There's some low self-esteem, low confidence happening. At least
There
that's
are people, though,
how
that
it
walk
sounds like that.
around in the world just thinking that everybody else is an idiot, and that
That's true.
they are the one who understands everything better. They're more competent, and if everybody just did it the way that they envision it, the world would be a better place. I mean, there are those people as well. That
That's true.
toxic, that
And
grandiosity.
many times when I try to broach the topic of low self-esteem, feelings of inadequacy, shame, no, I don't know, not me, not me. No, I just think, come on, there's a right way to do things. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
I
I
also
agree. I
think
think, yeah.
that question of how can he do this? How can he do this to me? Sadly, I will say that I think a lot of times it's not about her. he's not considering her at all. He's
Mm.
only thinking about how he feels and what he needs, and he's already labeled what's going on and labeled her, and that kind of codependent need for something from her. It's not seeing her as a complete person with her own thoughts and emotions and
Totally.
needs and all that. It's just
Totally.
about what she represents to him and what she can provide to him, and then a frustration, irritation whenever she does not give that to him.
That's another podcast, Jonathan. Maybe we've done a little bit of this before, but what you just described that's emotionally and relational maturity.
Right.
Yeah, I'm able to hold space. I can see my mate as an individual. I mean, of course they don't see things exactly the way I do. I mean, of course they have opposing thoughts. Of course they think this and they think that, and I don't think this anyway. And we live in that dynamic, and we smile about it. Like, I mean, of course. What I mean, I didn't pick somebody to just be my clone. But boy, a lot of folks have a real challenge in holding space. I want to jump to another topic that was woven into her story. I would love for us to talk about. She says, I went to counseling. It was a total waste of time. Total waste of time. And now he's going to counseling. I don't know what's happening there, but I'm betting it's a total waste of time. We hear that tragically all the time. I would say every new person who comes to the Marriage Recovery Center says, I've been to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different counselors, and as far as I can tell, it's been a total waste of time. Meaning, these behaviors that are, remember, you haven't said this, but I'll add it. For this man, he defends himself. All of these bad behaviors are outside of his awareness, or at least partially outside of his awareness. He normalizes, rationalizes it, defends it, blame shifts it, plays the victim with it. She's the one had anyway. So I think she's correct, and I'll stop with this. I think she's correct that presumably, she said, presumably he goes to counseling and is not really being confronted. The counselor probably doesn't really know the whole story. The counselor probably won't confront this man the way he needs to be confronted with his domination, defensiveness, dismissiveness. Anyway, what are your thoughts about that counseling for her and for them as a couple has been a total waste of time?
Yeah, initially I think one of the biggest problems when that is true is that the problems and the problem dynamics have not been accurately identified, or
Mm.
for some reason the therapist is aware of what some of the problems are, but is not speaking to that, is not kind of sharing their evaluation or their observations of what's going on with the clients, which I think is problematic. But then the next kind of the next obstacle, the next roadblock with effective, I guess, therapy is what's the plan for change, and is
Love
the
it.
plan is the plan happening? Are the clients taking those steps? Is there a commitment to taking those steps? And I think it might be that the therapist is saying a lot of they might be saying, here's what's going on, here's all the problem dynamics, but if there's no work being done, is if there's no plan for how to make the change, and then the change isn't happening, then of course it's gonna no change is gonna happen.
Jonathan, what you just said bears repeating. It's so incredibly important. And I have difficult conversations. I would have a difficult conversation with this woman, frankly. And I don't mean to be oppositional with her, but I think I would ask her the question, what is the plan for change? And she would likely say to me, she would likely say to us, well, he's going to counseling. And then I would say, but you just said that you're not seeing any change come from that. And she would likely say, well, yeah, but I mean, that's what we're doing at this point. And then I would say, and I'd love to have you speak into this. I'd love to, then I would say to this woman, that's not really a plan for change. You know, who said the words, hope is not an effective strategy? It's not a plan for change. And yet I feel kind of bad right now saying, like, I would end up confronting her saying that this isn't a plan for change. So take it from there. I mean, maybe just repeat yourself, because this is so important. Every referral, and Katie, you might even want to speak to this. Every woman that comes to the Marriage Recovery Center, I mean, I think they're saying, I need an effective plan for change, and we don't have one. It's not, there's no plan for change other than hope. I hope that my husband's therapist will confront him, but it's not happening. And I hope that our couples counseling will require him to hold space, but it didn't happen. And I hope life will be different, but it's not. All right, take it from there. I know this is a difficult topic.
Yeah, the hope for change, and really it's hoping that the other person will change, which is something that she has zero control over. And so that, like you said, that's not a very good plan, especially if all of the presenting evidence, especially, you know, if all of the data that she's collecting indicates that he is not changing, or that he is becoming more stubborn or argumentative, or digging in deeper with a lot of these power and control dynamics and the victim stance, that does not bode well for the hope. But it makes sense, right? That her primary, I mean, she's been, it sounds like, together with him for over a decade. They might have shared, you know, assets and money and children and families and friends and communities, and there's all of that to consider when she says, well, then what if I really have to think about, if he's not going to change, what's my plan? That's incredibly scary to think about. And she even mentioned that. I mean, she said, you know, that she fears what he's capable of, and the retaliation. And honestly, that is it's not a made up fear in her head. These are real fears and real dynamics that unfortunately we also see when separations happen, or when somebody decides to divorce or just move out of the house or something like that. That a lot of times, if the behaviors are not really, if there's not ownership and accountability on his part, they sometimes get worse.
I also think it might be important to point out that change is going to happen whether you plan for it or not. And it could be a healthy plan for change, or it could be an unhealthy natural change. She's saying that she's learning how to be defensive and reactive in an unhealthy way. That's change. That is a change in her behavior that's left unchecked because she doesn't want to look into ways to change and hold accountability for herself, not because of anything other than finding a way for her to be healthy in the midst of all this, and having the right boundaries and looking for support to become a person with healthy emotional boundaries. So whether you like it or not, and this is to everyone,
I love it, Katie.
Time changes people, and you could either be in control of that change and have hopes and good aspirations, or it's going to happen without you noticing, and it's going to make you into someone that you never wanted to be.
I often will say to people, let's think this through. What will, to this woman, what will happen if you don't bring about some kind of intervention? Because what we tell ourselves is, oh, nothing will happen. No, I'm good. I've learned to cope. I've learned to adapt. I've learned to accommodate. I'm going to say those words again. I want everybody to think about it. I've learned to cope in an unhealthy way. I've learned to adapt in an unhealthy way. I've learned to accommodate in an unhealthy way. And when women, in this case, this woman, if she really were honest with herself, she would say something like this: oh, yeah, I'm going to get more depressed. My anxiety is going to take a toll on me physically. It already has. I'm already sleeping unwell. I've gained weight. I'm having physiological problems, autoimmune issues. I've pulled apart from him. I'm irritated with him all the time. Anyway, and you start thinking about that. And Katie, to your point, is brilliant. It's brilliant. So, all right, now we can now you and I, woman with Jonathan or myself, we can have a robust conversation. Okay, so it's not just status quo. That's not one of the options. Status quo is not an option. You will deteriorate physically, emotionally, and so on. And so you can take ownership of that, or you can say, all right, I'm going to, and we've got other podcasts on the topic of interventions. It isn't just, you don't have to just grit your teeth and hope. No, you can take ownership for creating the possibility of healthy change. I don't think you meant this, Jonathan, but I'm quibbling with you a little bit. I know the term, you can't have any impact on him, I think is what you said, but she actually can, by changing herself, by saying, I'm not going to tolerate this, that, I'm going to act differently here, there. I'm going to, and that will impact him. I'm presuming you would agree with that.
Impact him, yes.
Right.
What I meant
Change
was
him,
she can't control his behaviors or his decisions.
Can't. Right.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm thinking of is that concept of the internal protective boundary. I'm thinking of Pia Melody talks a lot about protective boundaries, and this is if she is deciding to remain married, but also saying, I'm not going to tolerate certain behaviors anymore. I'm not going to stay up until 3:30 in the morning anymore. I'm just not going to do that anymore.
Right.
The developing this internal protective boundary helps with not having the emotional that reactive response to all of the uncomfortable or abusive situations, behaviors that she's then subjugated to. But it's way harder. I mean, the easiest way to not have a response, a trauma response, is for the abusive behavior to stop, or for you to be out of that environment. It's way harder to remain in the environment and then moment to moment have to change your responses, and that's constant. It's difficult.
You mentioned a name that people should probably look into. Pia Melody. We recommend her writings, everybody. So Pia Melody, and they could look into internal protective mechanisms, Jonathan. Internal protective boundaries. Yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes left for this specific podcast, and I just want to make sure that we clearly have a response to her overarching question, which is, what should a person do who's been in an abusive relationship and now has taken on some of those qualities of volatile defensiveness? what do you say to them on how to move forward now that they have taken on these traits?
I would say to her the cliche I gave some minutes ago, which was you are filled with a lot of very understandable feelings. You are reacting. You're reacting to some phenomenal distress, and you are reacting in ways that will actually make matters worse, and or at least they won't be helpful to you. So you need to get some help to figure out what is happening. And you've mentioned so many aspects of phenomenal emotional abuse in this relationship. So no surprise that you would be reacting in this way, but there are healthier ways to react. And you can learn those. We can help you with those, and there's support for you. So that's what I would say.
I
Jonathan?
also want to, oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Jonathan.
yeah, I would say individual. I mean, if he's unwilling or to participate in the couples sessions or just a dialogue about this, doing some individual work, some cognitive behavioral, dialectical behavioral, some type of work identifying what's coming up for her internally, and also identifying her needs. Then also, if she turns and focuses a lot on boundaries, what are the needs, and then also what is her plan.
Thank you, Jonathan. One thing I wanted to leave the listeners or the viewers of Mad in Love is kind of flipping the conversation a little bit as well, giving the opportunity for those who have been accused of NPD or emotional abuse to ask questions, to share their experience. And if you have anything that you'd like to send our way, please do, because I hear it over and over again on the phones from at least the wife saying, there's just no way he's going to move forward with working with any of us because he doesn't want to go in with a target on his head. We specialize in narcissistic and emotional abuse, so then all we see is narcissistic and emotional abuse. That's the concern. So I would love for anyone who has ever had a spouse say, I think there's been gaslighting, blame shifting, I'm concerned that you have NPD traits, write to us. I would love for Dr. Hawkins and Jonathan to affirm the process and let you know that as hard as these topics are, we don't treat anyone as some evil presence. We are not judgmental.
Right.
We really are here to find ways for everyone to get to a healthier spot because we want to promote healthy relationships. We are not here to downgrade anyone. So please, if you are listening, if your wife has made you listen to this podcast, I'm asking you to share your story and it will be anonymous.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Katie, so much for facilitating this and for bringing this new dimension to our Dr. Hawkins Reacts segment. And a big thank you to our listeners for sharing their story. This particular listener for sharing her story. Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing this story, for being vulnerable. And we hope that you have gained from Jonathan and Katie and myself talking about your situation. If today's discussion sparked something in you, or if you have your own story or question you'd like us to explore in a future episode, remember to email us at madinlove@marriagerecoverycenter.com. This is exciting. We're here to offer support, guidance, and a listening ear. If you found value in today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us reach more people who could benefit from our discussions. Okay, until next time, I'm Dr. David Hawkins, along with Jonathan Glover and Katie Buckley, signing off from Mad in Love. Remember, the journey to healing and understanding in relationships is ongoing, and we're here to walk that path with you. Take care. God bless.